topic at this crucial time. So, what do you think about when you hear about leadership? Maybe you can just say what you think about leadership when you hear about leadership in the chat section. And we need to understand that leadership is not just about strategy. It's about creating a culture that inspires people, a culture that fuels transformation and drives long-lasting success. So in any organization, I'm sure that for those of us that have joined tonight, at least you are in an organization where you are working in, or you've been in an organization where you've worked in, and leadership is the core to any business. So for success of any business, for any business to thrive, we need to have stable leadership. And how can we achieve this? Tonight, we have one of the best speakers when it comes to leadership, and I'll not take much time. Let me just read about his profile, and then we can be able to welcome him, and it can start off. So, speaker tonight is none other than George Ngugi. George Ngugi is his coaching philosophy is that people are naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. It's a belief that everyone that has ability to overcome challenges and create a life they want. I think that is so powerful. Everyone has an ability to create, to overcome challenges and create the life they want. So if you're living less, it's up to you now to be able to stand up and do what you can do. So George is the East Africa partner. For a number of global organizations from the UK, South Africa, and the US. These partnerships avail top-level training and exposure to global standards on leadership and executive development. He has also had a role to maintain the presence of different partners in the market while ensuring to deliver their programs with the high standards from the parent company and the country. So George holds a Master of Arts in Organizational Leadership, a Bachelor of Architecture from the UN. His coaching qualifications are a professional diploma in executive coaching from AOEC in the UK. Other certifications include the Leadership Psycho Practitioner, Lumina Spark Practitioner, a Lumina Sales Practitioner. And then his coaching experience, he's a leadership coach passionate about. Sorry for that. He's a leadership coach passionate about continuous learning and growth as drivers of business. He lives up to help individuals and teams realizing their full potential and operating at optimum performance levels. He has a unique blend of technical skills, business acumen, soft skills, and leadership. He zealously applied his education, professional qualifications, and acquired skills to their full potential, and hence become a high-value proposition in the architectural, business development, and leadership development fields. He has worked with teams undertaking various projects and business development initiatives within Kenya and the wider East Africa region, including Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda, and Ethiopia. So allow me to welcome our speaker tonight, Mr. George Ngugi. Karibu sana, George.
All right, thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, good evening. Yes, it's lovely to be here and connect with you. And Jay, you're so kind, far too kind. When I listen to that profile and just the way you've delivered it with such, eloquence, it gives me the oomph I need just to get through the session. And it's really, really quite an honor to be here. Thank you for sharing your platform with me. And I'm really excited to talk about this. And of course, I know we've interacted on different platforms in the HR space, and culture, of course, is something that I'm passionate about. And I've been able to continue to support different individuals, teams, and organizations around. In fact, together with my colleagues and partner in the business, we came up with the term. Of course, I am an architect by my original profession, but then, of course, now I design and help people design their lives purposefully, and of course, by extension, organizations and teams. And so it is a culture. I have evolved into a culture architect, away from the typical, building architect of brick and mortar. I'm now doing the work of culture architecting. And so I really do feel quite at home talking about culture. And I'd love for it to be an interactive session. And so to that end, I will share a deck which I'd like us to indulge and engage with. But before I share those bits, I want to put up just some high level um, information for us to quickly digest on that will sort of like give this conversation the initial shape and form. And so I'll quickly put up my screen. And I usually say culture, leadership, even life are things that are not very easy to describe. We experience them, we know them, but they're not very easy to describe. And so the question that I put out here is, what is culture? Or rather the statement of what is culture. I thought it's very important to just go straight into it with that. And of course, one way of describing it is a shared set of beliefs, values, and practices. And so in an organization or in a collective group of people, it's very important, just like in our traditional culture or our indigenous ethnic cultures, we have shared beliefs, shared norms, practices, etc. Similarly, when a group of people come together, there are certain common values, common beliefs and practices that shape and form what the organization is. And I rightly said not long ago that culture is like or leadership and culture and even life are quite similar, where you can't quite define them, but you can easily pick out when they're absent. When life is absent in a species, in a being, in a space, you can tell. When leadership is absent, you can tell, even if it may not be as easy to describe it. And similarly, when culture is just not right, you will easily be able to tell. So that's what I thought to put out as a starting point. And please feel free to indulge on the chat. You might have your own other definition. Of course, there are other definitions about culture. One of the interesting definitions I've come across is that culture is what you celebrate, what you tolerate, and what you continue to elevate. So there are sometimes we unfortunately have allowed negative practices to become propagated in organizations or in teams, sometimes by not saying anything, or even sometimes by actually celebrating. So you find that you're celebrating, tolerating, or even elevating certain behaviors. So that still is culture. I know we spoke some time back about culture code, and I just love that figure of speech. I thought to bring it back here again, which is the culture code, which is like just like code in coding and design, software architecture. Culture code is the operating system that powers an organization or powers our organization collectively. So there are things that are coded or built in like DNA into how we do things. And therefore, as we start this conversation, it's very important to be able to reflect on what are these leaders who are culture first, what are these leaders who are culture first, and what are the reasons that make culture first leaders succeed? What are culture first leaders and what makes culture first leaders succeed? So I want to just stop for a minute to just see if there's some feedback. And then, of course, as we continue with this, I want to onboard us real quick onto an interactive platform that I have that I'd like us to use just to be able to interact and be able to give each other real-time feedback. So allow me to share my screen again, and I'm going to invite you to, I'm putting up a slide with a QR code. I want to invite you to scan in that QR code because we'll need a bit of feedback even as we go through this conversation. So just scanning that QR code. The other thing that you can do, let me see if I can put this in the chat. Maybe I could share in the chat. And Jay, you could also help me, and Sheila and Skylar could help me in case I've sent it. I hope it goes to everybody. I've just sent a link in the chat. So please feel free to use that link in the chat or scan in the QR code because I want us to get or give each other some feedback. And as you're doing that, feel free to also put, if you have a sentiment or a comment, you can put it in the chat around what culture is, from where you stand, what your understanding of culture is, etc. I can see you guys are very quick, very early adopters. I can see we have Almost 20% of us are already on the platform and growing. Let's keep them coming. Keep them coming. So just come in. Good job. I can see you coming in close to over a quarter of us, or almost a quarter of us are here. Yeah, good job. Good job. Right. So we're talking about why culture first leaders will always succeed. And so I felt it was very fitting to actually share with us about what we would call culture first leaders. I think it's very good to get some insights on who culture first leaders look like, what it is that they've been able to achieve and they've become famous for. Of course, what is the situation, what I'd like to say, situation on the ground. And then, of course, we shall move together. We shall move together. So the first thing I want us to do, I can see we have a number of people on the chat. I want to quickly ask this question: what specific insights do you hope to get from this discussion? I think it's very important for me being a coach. I will also ask questions. So, what specific insights on culture do you hope? Because of course we all know about culture. Peter Drucker says culture eats strategy for breakfast. I think someone went further to even say strategy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So I'll be curious to know what would you like to take out of this session? And it's an open conversation. The good thing about when you put up your thoughts, we see other people's thinking, and we have the shared learning. So thank you. I can see something on performance culture. Thank you very much. Thank you, Maureen. I think that's Maureen. Keep them coming, keep them coming. What specific insights do you want to understand about culture, even as we talk about culture first leaders? And of course, as you're doing that, I'm just going to quickly just share from my notes. I love that. Instilling, and you can probably even say embedding a right and enabling culture. So of course, the thing about culture first leaders and culture first leadership is the fact that it is a leadership that chooses to make culture front and center. Naturally, we talk about people and culture, or HR, being sort of like the teams that are typically meant to be entrusted with the business of culture. But for culture first leaders, their top priority, and in fact, for people in HR, I have to talk about this a lot. We find sometimes people in finance tend to be closer to the corner office, and sometimes easily can act when the CEO is not present, or MD. And it's not uncommon for people in finance to actually succeed, and become the next MD or CEO. But of course, that tide is also changing to some extent, because now we have people in HR, people in culture, actually beginning to take in some of those opportunities. And so for culture first leaders, what I would say, in as much as it's very critical for the MD CEO to have a very close walk and journey with the CEO, the finance head of finance, because money is the air and breath. But in the same breath, culture first leaders have just as close a relationship with the head of people and culture, with the head of talent, with the head of the HR, simply because, and someone has actually rightly said that up to 50% of the work of a CEO is people. A lot of the work that CEOs actually sometimes find themselves very busy with is HR work, up to 50% of the work. Thank you to everybody who's giving us feedback. It's coming in quite well. People want to see about growth, know about culture change, know about the diverse generational environment that organizations. This is an interesting one. And someone needs to mute the mic. Maybe someone could just mute the mic, please. All right, thank you. So I think this sounds like the diverse in terms of multi-generational and probably multicultural environment. How do we have the inclusivity? So diversity, inclusivity, and equity, even as we talk about culture. What does a positive culture actually look like? Change and adaptability. These are very, very rich pieces of feedback, and thank you for bringing them as they have come. And so, like, going back, so leaders who are culture first hold the people agenda and the culture agenda as a high level as the agenda of finance, of strategy, of operational excellence, etc. And of course, I have quite a few examples which I'll share with you about culture first leaders. And it's not just about the leaders, it's leaders and organizations. The thing about culture first is that when you think about the organization, some of us know the organizations more than we even know the leader. And some places we know the leader more than the organization. But I'm going to take you through different culture first leaders. But thank you so much for the feedback and keep it coming. So I'm going to stop sharing just for a moment and take you back to my other deck. Okay. Okay, great. One moment, please. Right. Should be coming up now. Do let me know that the screen is visible. I believe it's visible. Okay. All right. So just a little bit of facts I got from the AIHR. Talked about, according to Gallup, which is famous, of course, for Strength Finder, it says that organizations with strong cultures improve performance in the following areas when your culture is good. So just to make a case for this culture, number one is employee engagement, 50% or 50-point increase over 3 years, net profit, 85% increase over 5 years, workforce growth, 25 increase over 3 years, and patronage, 138% improvement over 5 years. This is Gallup's research around many different organizations that have been able to work on culture. So it's important to have positive culture and thriving culture. McKinsey tells us that only 25% of employees find their leadership team to be inspiring and fit for purpose. In other words, only 1 in 4 leaders, something to think seriously about. Gallup again said that 2/3 of employees saw a vibrant, high-performing culture as a pipe dream. In other words, it's something to aspire to, but they don't really think and believe it can be achieved. That's a tough one. Then, of course, 32% of employees still on the Gallup study of high potential employees indicated they would not tolerate ineffective leadership and would look to move to a company that values culture. So what I'm doing here is really just laying on you the reality that culture first leadership actually matters. It's extremely important to have culture first leadership. And so I'm going to very quickly share with you a number of leaders who can say are culture first and talk about what they were able to do and achieve, and in that way achieve high level of success. The first is actually the late, that is Herb Keller. And for those who know, some of you may know him, some of you may not know him, but Herb Keller, the late, is famous for Southwest Airlines, which went for over 5 decades without ever failing to turn a profit. And that includes going through COVID and going through 9/11. And you can just check out Southwest Airlines. There are budget airlines, regional airlines in the US. They're very, very famous. And they're not like a top-end airline, but they have an amazing, amazing culture. And that's what has been able to keep them above water, despite the most trying times in a very, very volatile industry. And of course, Herb Keller talks about how we have a people department and that's what it deals with. We don't call it human resources. So the funny thing is that people actually loved or love to work at Southwest Airlines. It was all about fun, love, and employee empowerment when they set up the company. Right? It's better to have people as co-workers, so to speak, rather than treat people like family, so to speak, rather than co-workers. Because when you feel well treated as an employee, then you end up treating your customers well, and that way they're able to keep the company above, keep it profitable. If you look at some of the reviews that have been done about Southwest, you see how at some point people actually took a pay cut because they need to, I think, add some more aircraft to their fleet. They talk about how even when they go, because they don't have it's a budget airline, they don't have very many flights. At some point, they didn't have many aircraft. You would have even the pilots going back to help clean up, the cabin, as they're basically like a jumbo jet. And so you know how they're like matatus, basically, where you land in Mombasa, offload people in a few minutes, you have another bunch of people and back and forth and back and forth. And so if you look at Southwest Airlines, they created a culture where people believed, in the company, they believed in the success of the company, and they would almost do everything to make sure, or anything, including taking a pay cut, to make sure the company is stable, the company is growing, and they can actually get through difficult times. This is, of course, many years past, and we say the history of about 50 years, but more recently, we can talk about the story of Satya Nadella. He's a culture first leader. And of course, he's famous for the Microsoft role he had. And when he took over, they were in a slump. They were in a slump, and they were not really, moving to the next level. And one of the biggest achievements Satya was able to bring in is what they called growth mindset. Through empathy, through collaboration. There was a very high level of transformation. And during his time, and if you look at the history of Microsoft, there was a significant growth and of course competitiveness, which has led to basically what we have today, even now with the advent of AI and everything else. Another leader I'll give you, who you may not know or you may know, but of course you definitely have interacted with his successful company, is Brian Chesky. Brian Chesky, of course, founder of Airbnb, was constantly obsessed with the culture of the organization, applying design thinking. He was always trying to see how do we have people, you know, um, be fit to the culture. And I've had people say that sometimes you may have very talented people, but they may not be, fit to the culture. And sometimes you would pass on very high quality or talented employees because they're not quite fitting with the culture, And he almost always spoke about design-driven culture, So always thinking about the end user, thinking about the client's needs. And I'm sure for you who have interacted with Airbnb, and when you see what they have been able to do in terms of disrupting the hospitality industry, you can actually see his being culture first was not in vain. I'm really curious just to see the feedback coming in, if there is any. Jay, Sheila, and Skylar, you can keep me on track in case there's feedback coming in. And so let me take a break. And I know some people are already thinking, all right, it's great to know about, Microsoft and Airbnb and Southwest, but that doesn't sound, so close to home. So don't worry, I got you. We shall also have some examples of African successes and what they were able to do. But switching back to our interactive chat, I just want to see if there's some more feedback that's coming in, still on the thing that we talked about. So I'm going to go back to the deck. And I want to get some feedback from you. I want to get some feedback from us. I've talked about what culture is, what culture first leaders are like. So I'm going to ask you guys if you have any concerns. And for you, if you have not been able to join in, you can use this QR code. You can, just use it to put in your feedback. You can scan the QR code. I'm going to put in the link again in the chat. You can use the link in the chat. I want to hear your voice. I was about to say kura yako, but your characters and your words here are your voice. So please, let's hear your voice. Let's hear your thoughts. What for you is a big concern? Because, and as I say this, I'm going to give you one reality that, and it's a controversial statement, but I'm still going to make it. Some of the most successful companies, and let me say even closer to home, may not necessarily be the companies with the most vibrant cultures. In fact, it is in reality sometimes quite the opposite. Some of the companies that many of us sometimes aspire to work in, on the ground, the situation is different. It's not as we would imagine. And so I'm very curious because this culture conversation, I feel like we're literally just on the tip of it. We're just on the cusp of it. People are concerned about culture. Sometimes you can't quite put your finger on what good culture is, but you can almost tell when things are not working out right. So I'm really curious to know, is there a concern you have, or just a query that you might have around culture? Because I don't want this to be very theoretical. I want us to actually be able to interact in a very practical way around what this means. In fact, I could go as far as saying, do you have clarity about the culture where you work? And is it vibrant? Is it thriving? Is it nurturant? Does it inspire growth? Or is it something else? I'd love to see the feedback coming in. I could say, I just say your voice or your characters are your your vote is your voice. Your characters are, are your expression. It's your expression. Let me see what's coming in. Now, all right, thank you for that. Aha, the relationship between a leader and the culture of organization. Love it, love it, love it. And that's a very good one because, of course, in reality, we've just talked about the fact that leaders, in fact, I've not forgotten a very amazing statement that I had from Dr. Cesar Mwangi when we had a session on coaching at Strathmore Business School. And he, of course, talked about how we all know about Peter Drucker's sentiments that culture is strategy for breakfast. And he actually went ahead to say that it is actually leaders that eat strategy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Because, of course, leaders are the drivers of culture. In fact, we like to say that leaders bring in the weather. So if you want to know the kind of culture that you have in an organization, have a look at the leaders, have a look at the leadership team. Now, just some key traits for culture first leaders that you can think about. Okay, someone's question has all been answered. Please, if you don't, is it the same person? I'm not sure. Maybe you just clarify that in a moment. For a couple of traits of culture first leaders. These are people who they live out the values. You walk the talk. You know, I love this other principle about storytellers. They are storytellers. What does it mean to be a storyteller? It means that you actually talk about the why. Simon Sinek is famous for his sentiments of start with why. People need to understand the why we're doing things. You just don't say it's a policy. You know, we have changed it. It's just the way we're going to do it. We're cutting costs on this. We're changing the process on this. You must be able to explain to people the why, you know. So here I can see that as HR leaders, being a boardroom full of leaders that understand data from a bottoming perspective, how do you position ourselves that the top management buys the culture, conversation, allocate resources? Constant conundrum. And if someone here is a HR leader, the person typing this is a HR leader, I feel you, and I believe literally you have described the conundrum and the predicament of almost every HR leader, where you are constantly fighting to make the agenda of people front and center. And unfortunately, it tends sometimes to take a back seat. Sometimes it takes a back seat, and what carries the day is these other operational, for lack of a better word, operational issues, right? So do you give up? The answer is no. I think the biggest issue that you need to do that is how do you show the correlation between vibrant culture or a culture that's struggling and business performance. It's very, very important to show the correlation between vibrant culture and business performance, or effective leadership and business performance. And I'm going to quickly get into that. One more thing about culture first leaders, they see culture not just as something, you know, that is nice to have, but they see it as core to the strategy. And of course, the examples I've given you should be able to inspire you enough around the reason that we need to have culture first leaders. But I'm also going to give you a couple more closer to home, so that at least we do not think that this is just an issue that only applies for the Western world. And so I have a couple of nice examples which I'm quite happy about that I want to share with you about leaders who have been culture first closer to home. I thought just because some organizations may be represented to steer clear of literally in our city, in our country. So the examples I have are from our continent, but not from our city and country. And so one of the leaders who is very famous for being a culture first leader is Strive Masiva. And for those who may know him, he's famous because of his work with Econet, and he's done many, many amazing innovations and groundbreaking, achievements, in Africa, And for him, his leadership has always been founded on his spirituality and on his ethics, and always forming and building things along the purpose-driven model of doing things, And the values in his organizations are consistent with those personal values, which is, of course, integrity, excellence, innovation, and customer focus. That's someone you should also look out on. And you could see, or rather you can be able to see what he's been able to achieve through his organizations. Another one which I'm also quite happy to report about is Bethlehem from Ethiopia, Bethlehem Tilahun, who is famous because of her company, Soul Rebels, which of course is globally recognized. It's an eco-friendly brand, footwear brand, and consistently walking the talk. They've been very keen on empowering the people, the community, inclusivity, and bringing positive change through positive action. So again, you can look her up, and the work she's been able to do. It's a global brand impacting and delivering value across the globe, but still being able to very ethically produce what they make, and of course, be able to have impact on the community. One more is Mr. Tayo of Yusu from Niger. And of course, he's the founder and CEO of Paga. And again, of course, for him, being one of the leading platforms, he's one of the, he created one of the leading platforms, it's fintech and mobile lending, etc. For him, culture was inbuilt from day one. He literally was obsessed with how we manage people, how we handle people, and how we can then use that workforce to drive disruption in the particular industry, which is quite competitive. And of course, if you talk about the culture, if you can read about the organization, they are very big on service, on passion, accountability, reliability, and of course, the Kaizen way, which is, of course, continuous improvement. And one of the things I want to highlight about Kaizen is the fact that in the Kaizen system, borrowed from, is that someone speaking? Borrowed from the Japanese. One of the things that makes Kaizen such a hallmark of culture that is thriving is that you can be able to give feedback to the way we do things, even if you're not at a very high level in the organization. And that's one of the hallmarks of course, Kaizen way of doing things, of constant improvement, but also more importantly, allowing the voice of every employee, allowing the voice of, everybody to be able to input. And of course, if you go to the original place where it comes from, which is the production lines in Toyota, one of the things that would happen is that if somebody found a way to be able to create efficiency, you literally could stop the entire production line and give feedback. I can see there's a comment that's coming on the chat, which is, of course, how does organization culture influence turnover rates? And by extension, can I say retention? And of course, consequently, what does a high turnover rate indicate about organization? I think that second question sort of like speaks into the first. It's sort of like the answer, the correlation. If you have a low retention or a high turnover, it means that there's something that is not going right. In other words, HR is not necessarily prioritizing retention. Or retention itself has not been embedded in the company culture. So these are some heavy questions, but they also seem and come across as statements. David, thank you for putting them across. Very difficult questions we need to ask ourselves. What is the correlation between turnover or retention by that extension and culture, positive or thriving culture? And could there also be a correlation between that and the HR function not being able to effectively embed a culture? I wouldn't just talk about embedding culture, but actually creating and diagnosing issues in the culture to be able to create retention, employee engagement, productivity, etc. Very good questions and strong reflection points. I want to quickly now go to the other thing I want to talk about, because I want to talk about what culture is, which I did. I want to talk about examples of leaders who are culture first, and now I want to quickly walk us through what can we do. I think it's very important to be able to forward our awareness and our learning into action. What do we do from tomorrow? What do we do from next week? What do we do from next month? Because we are realizing and we get to appreciate that culture, thriving culture is what we want to bring about. So how do we go about bringing about that thriving culture? So again, I want to still point us to, I still want us to point us to my deck, which I still desire, and I still would like to get more interaction and feedback from you. I'm not feeling like some people are, or I'd like to feel like we are together. And so I'm gonna share a quick, it's actually a survey, and I'd love to get some feedback. So again, I'll put up the QR code one more time, and I will also share it in the chat. So please engage this. And of course, I'm conscious of time. So please engage with us on this. So let me share screen again. I want to just see what the level of familiarity is like for us about this topic. And then I'm going to quickly go into the last thing which I want to talk about. So please give me your feedback as we continue. Is this culture conversation something you are familiar with, something you have engaged with? Um, you know, um, is it new for you? For someone like David, I can see there's been a high level of engagement on that. Oh, wow, this is good. I can see that we have more people tending towards high level of expertise and fewer without any. Thank you for the feedback. Let's keep it coming. I'll keep an eye on that. And as we do that, I want to quickly now transition to the last thing I want to talk about, which is, of course, how we can actually be able to address the questions of culture. And that is through culture survey. Culture surveys. And for me, this is what I spend a lot of my time doing, supporting organizations to be able to diagnose. We say that this is what helps you to get feedback and make very informed decisions around, of course, HR, around training, around initiatives, for retention, productivity, name it. And just to quickly highlight why they matter, culture surveys, they matter because, of course, we like to say that they bridge the gap between what we call the desired culture, or what we say in our mission, vision, and values, and the reality core ground. They help us have insight on the needs of people, of the staff, right? And then, of course, it actually helps. I have a type on my, instead of saying show, it says it helps us sow key ideas. It should have been show. I think this one is to help people who are dozing because I know it's almost bedtime. So culture surveys show, not sow, key areas for improvement and must win battles. What are the key areas? Because you can't change everything in an organization. So what is that must win battle? So it's very important to be able to quickly use a culture survey to be able to point you to the direction of what do you need to work on and what is that must win battle. So this is something which I'd really love to engage more with you about, how you can be able to diagnose potential problems that could be going on in your culture. And of course, how we do these culture surveys is through, of course, we have focus groups, we do questionnaires, but more importantly, which I really love, is that we actually have a globally recognized organization culture survey tool that can be able to help get very qualitative and quantitative insights that you can actually be able to make a good strategic plan around how you can be able to you know work on the culture for good. And so key thing I want to say, okay, I think we already covered this one. The key thing I want to say is that as we do culture surveys, and this is something we can go deeper in, I know we don't have as much time. The key thing that needs to happen in organization and is that the leader, the very senior leadership of the organization needs to be at the forefront, needs to spearhead culture and culture revolution or culture refining. So culture surveys define culture, but then now we usually say you need to define culture, then begin to, refine it or work towards refining it. So leaders, we need culture first leaders who are spearheading at the forefront of these initiatives. Now, sometimes you will not have everybody as a culture first leader. You find your HR leader must be culture first. You may have a senior leader like an MD or deputy CEO or head of operations. One of the things that we usually do is to start to align the leadership team. It's so important to align the leadership team around the culture we want to see. And that's why we talk about desired culture versus the actual culture. There has to be very deep conversation between or around in the leadership team around what is the desired culture and looking at the reality straight in the face. These are the results that have come from the feedback. This is the actual culture we have. And where do we go from here? And then, of course, once the leadership is fully aligned, there are many interventions, including coaching, team and group coaching, individual coaching. And then, of course, from that point on, you can cascade the initiative to the levels below, whether it's the middle management, and of course, begin to pick champions in the organization, etc. So I'm just giving a very high level, and I'm conscious of time. I'd like to indulge my moderators a bit, Jay, Sheila, and
Yes, we are
Skylar.
here. Yeah, we are here.
Yeah, especially because of time. Let me know how we are doing. And I'm sure we also need to give a provision to be able to get feedback, more feedback around the conversation and to hear some more voices. So
we,
give us
we
the
can we can be sure that we can sleep a bit, maybe by 20 minutes.
Okay, great,
Yeah.
great. So I'm looking at the charts and I'm also looking at, oh, there's something that's come up on the chart. So, okay, thank you, Joy. So, I'm going to ask you to actually kindly give your experience also because uh, you have had the experience, at least Joy, I know you worked in different organizations. I know you have experienced leaders who are actually culture first. So I'd love to hear from you what your experience has been like. There are many culture first leaders. I've also had the privilege of working with a number of culture first leaders. In fact, some of the most successful projects that we have been able to undertake have had leaders who are highly uh, culture first. But I must admit, the famous adage, leaders born or leaders made, in reality, there are many leaders who are not culture first naturally and left to their own devices, but they have evolved, especially when they got to see the correlation between a thriving culture and business performance and began to move and walk the journey to being culture first leaders. So I have quite a few examples, of leaders who have really embraced culture. And as a result, have been able to turn around areas about in the business that were completely stagnated. Of course, because of data protection, I cannot necessarily give the details, but I'm happy to engage with anybody who want to benchmark around that. David, thank you for the question. It says in employee engagement surveys that are meant to usually to drive culture change. Good one. The team often doubts the anonymity due to systems that notify the line manager about completion status. So what can leaders use to build trust in the service anonymity? So this is literally, and get buy-in. This is literally why people like myself, I know there's Jay and many other players come in, because there are times when there's a trust issue. When culture is not good, one of the biggest things that is compromised is trust. And so there's a great fear that exists about, do we have freedom after speech? Well and good, we shall be asked to speak and we shall speak our part. But there's always that nagging question, is there freedom after speech? And so I'd like to say that I have seen it be much more effective to have another party, whether it's a consultant or, especially for why I think an end-to-end consultant around, of course, the survey plus also the implementation is useful, is because there's some there's some efficiency there. There's some organizations that choose to go into to a third party just for data collection. But in reality, it's often quite, it's good for credibility to show that the process is independent and is not in any way compromised. And the information that you are giving or inputting to the feedback is not necessarily going to be either identified or brought back to you, circled back to you, or there shall be no victimization. But it's a difficult one. And as a HR leader, there needs to be, just like many of the other sensitive matters you manage, there needs to be a high level of wisdom applied in executing on this.
I think we lost George.
Hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
George, we
I
can't
think,
hear you.
yeah, we had
Now
Can you
we
hear
lost,
me?
can.
we had lost him, but now he's back.
Paul, Kenya Power has done their thing.
So sorry. Wameanua, sawa.
But at least my audio is still able to carry, and I think people have a good picture of how I look like. Yes, Jay, is my screen still visible or it's
Yeah,
not there anymore?
Screen is visible.
Great, great, great. Let me quickly just sample. If there's, I think there are a couple of other pieces of feedback that have come. Let's see. How a healthy culture looks like. That's a very deep question, and it's a long conversation. And what I would say about a healthy culture is how do I say it? A healthy culture is not the same. It's not a one size fits all. It's not. It can't be a one size fits all. Let me put it that way. A healthy culture cannot be a one size fits all because let me use an example of an industry. I think a healthy culture in insurance industry is very different from a healthy culture in a hospital. You know, does that make sense, guys? A healthy culture in FMCG is very different from a healthy culture in not-for-profit development world. So it's a very good question, but it does not have a short answer. And that's the beauty of now the culture surveys and culture evolution, culture defining process, that in reality, it's important to be able to figure out what's a winning culture for your organization. It cannot be one size fits all, And of course, now that we're in a multi-generational workforce, one of the interesting things that is existing, I've heard of, in fact, I've been in conversations where people have said there are now certain, let me say, demographics where people are not particularly interested in the things that used to motivate people in the traditional sense, pension, what else? There are allowances. There are certain allowances. I don't know if anybody has been involved in that kind of conversation, and the people who have said, just give me my everything, nijipange, And of course, you know which generation that is. And so you find that perhaps if you're dealing with millennials or Gen Xers, what would matter to a Gen Xer is different from what would matter to a millennial. Or maybe Gen Xers and millennial are closer to each other, but for Gen Z, different story. And so even when you talk about whether it's the motivation, the culture inputs, what creates a value, it's so varied. And so to give a very lengthy or just try to do justice to that answer, it really needs to be very specific to the group of people. It needs to be specific to their background. And of course, it has to be very specific to what matters for that particular group of people. There's a very well-structured statement here. Wow. Okay. Damaris, thank you. Just a moment. Let me read it. So there's a comment here from Damaris. It says, wow. Okay, I'm not going to read it word for word, but according to this is how can the discourse on culture and performance sink in across the board? And yes, if agriculture is, I'm just going to read it in English, it's faster. Agriculture is our backbone of our economy. How does the culture, Okay, that's a very, very good question. I don't think we have enough time for it, but what I would say about that question is, in reality, we have so many shifts that are happening. And yes, our base and our backbone was agriculture, but now we are shifting. And of course, you have seen some of the younger generation who of course, would be our productive, shifting from that, what is their preference for agriculture or the traditional way of doing it. And so the big question is how then can we now evolve even some of the traditional things like farming, small businesses, etc. So I think it's a long conversation, and Jay, I'm going to direct it back to you because I feel there are many conversations that we could actually have as offshoots or as spin-offs from this conversation to be able to answer some of these questions. But I think for me, one of the big things I would say is you just need to start somewhere. And so, for instance, if you're wondering about your culture, whether the culture can be fixed The question is just start somewhere. For me, we just start somewhere. And the somewhere to start is actually survey. Diagnosing the culture will be the very first place to start. And then, of course, once you have a picture of what the culture is, then you can actually be able to know what to fix and what actually matters, especially for your people. And so, in the interest of time, and of course, just because of my technical challenge, I'm going to hand it over back to you, Jay. And yeah, we can possibly pick up some of this feedback from here and possibly do another follow-up to this conversation. Over back to you, Jay.
Thank you so much, Bwana George, for that wonderful presentation. I think it's been an eye-opener to most of us here. And I believe that we are going to implement this in our organizations. For those that are leaders, I've seen HR leaders in the room, I've seen CEOs, I've seen managers in the room. I think we should be able to implement this so that we can be able to create a positive work culture. Now, I'll be welcoming questions. I can have a few questions just to respond to this, and then we can be able to call it a night. So now, Joy asks, any culture first leaders in Kenya? I have not worked with such one leader here in Kenya. I think, George, that one you can take. And in an employee engagement surveys that are usually meant to drive culture change, my team often doubts the anonymity due to systems that notify line managers about completion status. What strategies can leaders use to build trust in the surveys anonymity, and encourage greater buy-in and participation? George, you can take that.
All right, thank you for that, Jay. That's okay. Thank you for that, Jay. That's
It's
from
David.
David.
Yes, David.
Yeah. Okay, fine. So I think the question is, of course, how we can be able to build anonymity. For me, the go-to would actually be working with a credible partner who actually is using validated tools and methodology. And of course, now that because we have, of course, GDPR, you're better off sometimes giving some of these tasks and roles to a third party that, of course, can be held accountable and can also deploy or execute with professionalism. And of course, from a HR perspective, it also takes away that burden. The same way sometimes you will give recruiting work to a provider, or you give work, and I know, Jay, you come in there, or you give work around certain, whether it's job evaluations, job grading, etc., to partners, not because you're not able to do it internally, but because it's not the best use of your time, or sometimes you need to be able to get people who are focused on that area to do it. And then, of course, you pick up the findings and take it to the next level, because this work needs to be deployed at different stages. There's, of course, the data collection, and of course, now there's the implementation. So for me, I'd say get and work with credible providers who have a track record, who, of course, are compliant to data protection, and of course are able to be kept accountable in terms of making sure there's anonymity, making sure there's handling of data that is sensitive in the manner that needs to be done. So I think that's how I would go about it. And so it's really and there are quite a few people in this market who are doing very well in that space, and so it's to engage with them, and they should be able to give guidance, and support.
Thank you so much for that answer, George. Back to Joy's question, who asked that, are there any culture first leaders in Kenya?
We have many culture first leaders, and I know some of them you've interacted with, like I said, I want to hold back from mentioning any particular individuals or particular organizations, especially for this market, because of some of them actually are people I've worked with, just because of the nature of some of the confidentiality clauses. But yes, there are many leaders who have been very, very culture oriented, and they have built organizations that, of course, reflect that. And in my own personal experience, some of the organizations where I've been able to see culture as a very big driver of the performance of the organization include I have been involved with, of course, Dimension Data, who have been on the forefront of technology. I have been involved with Jubilee, someone speaking. And of course, we have leaders who have been very, very keen to drive culture, You see the same happening also even in academia with Strathmore Business School, among many other organizations where you find in Strathmore University where the value system that governs the organization is seen through and through in people conduct themselves, in the ethos, in the mantra, in how people deliver. And so there are very many, and of course, no individual, no organization is perfect, but the key thing is to look at the principle and see, is this organization driven by the value system? Are we true to the values? Do we stay on course with what are the values that govern us? And do we use those to even go through our processes and what we do towards giving value towards our end client, So there are many, like I said, examples, but I'm also keen not to, because of data protection, to highlight too many, especially because some of these are projects that are still active and there's some confidentiality dynamics. Back to you, Jay.
Thank you so much for that. Damaris says that I love this conversation. Just listening to you has made me ask myself, how can the discourse on culture and performance sink in across board? As I'm Kenya, ukulima, they say, ni uti wa mgongo. Taken to mean the key, it is key contributor to our economy. So how does culture play in this very dear way of life? So here is a hilarious analogy I have thought of. In Kenya, we understand farming, from tea highlands to the maize belts. We know that no matter how good your seeds are, how modern your tools, or how much rain falls, the harvest is ultimately decided by the soil. Truth is, culture in business works the same way. Strategy is the seed. You can import the best strategy playbooks in the world. Leadership is the farmer. Trained, skilled, hardworking teams are the crops full of potential ready to grow. But if the culture is toxic, depleted, or neglected, growth will be stunned no matter the effort. On the other hand, where the soil is rich, nourished, and cared. So basically, what she's asking is, how can we apply this in the Kenyan perspective?
Thank you for reading that, Jay. I think when I read it, I didn't do justice, and thanks for that. So let's go to farming. So in farming, and farmers can relate to this. What do you do when your shamba is not doing well? There are many different approaches. There are people who choose to put fertilizer, and fertilizer for a long time has been a trigger word in our country, or choose to go organic and put in manure. There are cases where people actually choose to it's called crop rotation, or let that ground, sometimes then go for a season without anything being planted. And so I feel Damaris's analogy points to the reality that sometimes people get the best talent, they have the best initiatives, they have a wonderful strategy, but then of course the bed on which they are embedding or they are laying all their resources is not optimal. And so again, I'd say that's more of a comment than a question, because that is pretty much making a case of why you have to address the culture, because there are many organizations that have the best talent, best strategy, they have a good product, they have some level of dominance in the market or some good market share, but for some reason, there's a mismatch. So what I'd say, that statement by Damaris, or that analogy, I could not see a better case for addressing culture, because culture is the soil, And so, of course, we have many different farmers here. So we have the organic farmers, we have the other ones who will go for fertilizer, etc. And so whatever approach you choose to take, I think the common thing that we have and that we have to accept is that is that there's something about the soil that's not right, and it must be sorted. Now, the approach may vary, but the fact is a problem that needs to be addressed is clear. And so I think, honestly speaking, I couldn't think of a better way to conclude this conversation, Jay, because what Damaris is basically saying is that we must fix the soil. And culture, in this case, is the soil, you know. The how, of course, will vary, but there's no denying that if the soil is bad, there's no one who will be satisfied. Yep.
Thank you so much. And I think David asked a question, and Damaris gave an answer for the same. I think you can add something. So how does organizational culture influence employee turnover rates? What does a high turnover rate typically indicate about an organization? Could it suggest that the HR isn't prioritizing retention, or it's more likely embedded in the company's culture itself? And then Damaris responds and says that high turnover often reflects deeper cultural issues, not just the HR. For example, if a leader is toxic or communication is poor, employees feel undervalued and leave. A culture that ignores work-life balance can lead to burnout and exits. On the other hand, when employees feel supported, heard, and aligned with the company values, they are more likely to stay. Is there anything you can add? Because I can see that Joy has done us justice there.
Thank you. And David's question is again a very loaded one. What I'd say about culture and retention, and consequently turnover, I think if you were to try and diagnose culture and diagnose what retention, the first place to go definitely would be the culture, right? But in reality, there are other sub tenants that would build into culture. For instance, like I'll give you an example of tech industry. Tech industry is very, very competitive, and competitive in the sense that we don't have, for instance, enough engineers. You know, we have our local giants here. Then we have the global players like Amazon and all these other players, including Microsoft and others. And so what happens in some industries, for instance, tech, sometimes turnover is just because people keep getting better offers, you know, here within the country and across the globe. So, you know, we have our developers and our engineers. You cannot retain them. It's quite challenging because they are very good deals and it's very hard to match. You know, the demand for that particular skill set is very high. Then, of course, so that may not be it may not be directly related to culture, but it's also more industry specific. So why I've given an extreme example of, for instance, tech industry is because, and those in the tech industry can confirm, retention is a different kettle of fish in tech. Let me just say that. And of course, it would have to be more than money, and that's where culture comes in. So probably culture, but in a much more broader sense. So I would not necessarily say that every organization where retention is an issue, it could be strictly speaking about culture. Sometimes it's just an industry dynamic. I'm thinking of another industry. The industries that tend to really have people really retain. Insurance industry, in some organizations, there's very high levels of retention. Does it mean there's good culture? There are places where there's high level of retention and there's actually poor culture. Now that's the ironic thing. You get the point? So you could have high retention or rather high turnover, but there could be some elements of the culture that are good. And you've seen some of those tech organizations. And there are places where they may have low turnover, but there are really big issues about the culture and there could even be toxicity. So I would not use retention specifically only as the only thing about culture. There are many things about, employee engagement, this productivity, and other key metrics that you want to look at besides just retention. Also including growth and even just there are opportunities for people to get to the next level, etc. So I would say if you look at retention and turnover alone, it may not give you the full picture because there are actually dynamics around different industries. But of course, Damaris' comment was also very apt and talked about the fact that, of course, psychological safety is important and trust is also very important, So not to, of course, negate everything you've said about culture, but there's also the other side of the coin. There's also the other side of the coin. Back to you, Jay.
Thank you so much for that. I think Damaris has made another comment there. Thank you, David, for raising this. In my view, you are right. For sure, employees need psychological safety to answer honestly. Leaders can build trust, that trust by being transparent about what is tracked, making it clear that managers only see completion, not content, and by separating accountability from surveillance. Most importantly, when employees see their feedback leads to action and not punishment, confidence and in anonymity grows, participation naturally increases. So thank you so much for that, Damaris. I think you can give us your parting shot this evening, Bwana George, as we finalize.
All right, thank you so much, Jay. Of course, your very capable team of Skylar, Sheila. Thank you so much, everybody who has come in and really enriched this conversation. I'd like to say that I'd like to look at this as not the end of this conversation, but literally just the beginning. And I would love to connect with as many of us here as possible. You know, we can connect on LinkedIn, connect on different platforms. Let's have tea, let's have coffee and talk about, you know, because some of these things are not things you can just talk about, you know, in a very short 1-hour session in terms of the specifics of your own context. So I'm happy to, and of course, Jay, you can also host us again. I'm happy to get together and go deeper into this. So what is my parting shot? My parting shot is when you talk about culture of an organization, every single individual has the opportunity to be a culture-first leader. One of the things I am a strong believer in is that there's leadership without a title. You don't have to wait to become a CEO. You don't have to wait to become, you know, a head of HR or HR director. You have the ability. And remember, we said culture is what we celebrate, what we tolerate, what we elevate. So what are you tolerating? Even that team you're in, what are you celebrating? What are you elevating? And are you, by doing that, a culture-first leader, or are you, you know, just among the other people who are embedding and entrenching some of the negative and dark, toxic cultural practices? So I leave you with that, and let's connect. Let's connect on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn has been put in the chat. You know, let's even have chai when the opportunity will come, or coffee. I know Jay will be able to help bring us together, and I would love to come back again and continue with this or any other conversation. Asante sana, Jay, and it was truly a pleasure.
Thank you so much.